The college football season is still young, and Notre Dame's roster is still taking shape, but strengths and weaknesses on this team have emerged, and now it's a matter of relying on their strengths and improving their weaknesses the rest of the way. We break it down on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast, and I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I am thrilled to have you here on Thursday, September 19th, and thanks for starting your day right here by making this your first listen of the day. As always, this show is free and available wherever you get your podcast, plus you can watch the full thing on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, please remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, or rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast platform. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. It's hard to believe, but we are already a quarter of the way through the regular season, and this Notre Dame team is starting to take shape. They are going to continue to evolve as the season goes along, no doubt. But really, the purpose of today's show is to evaluate where things are at on this roster 3 games in. So today, I'm going to rank the top performing position groups on the roster based on what they have done up to this point. This is not a list of the most talented position groups. This has nothing to do with the evaluation before the season or what they could potentially be. This is based only on what they have produced through the first 3 games. And the purpose of this is really to figure out what has been the biggest strength and weaknesses on this team so far, and then what can they do the rest of the way to improve and what it's going to look like by season's ends. I actually did a similar exercise like this in May, I think, of the offseason. I predicted what I think the best position groups on the roster would be. It certainly had some change from what I predicted it would be, but there's also been some things that have been pretty consistent. So let's get right into it. The top performing position group on this roster so far, to me, has been the running backs. And honestly, this has been a pretty easy decision for me. Notre Dame's top 2 backs, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, put the team on their back to beat Texas A&M. They scored the only 2 touchdowns in that game. They certainly did get some help from Mitch Jeter, and unfortunately, the kicking and punting unit did not make it on this list today, but Mitch Jeter was a big reason why they won as well. But as I pointed out before, as well as several others have, if Notre Dame had just given the ball to the running backs more against Northern Illinois, they probably don't lose that game. And I think that speaks to the confidence that the fan base has in this group and what they have done to earn that. They also set the tone early against Purdue when Jeremiah Love broke open a 45-yard touchdown run to basically put the game away before it even got started there. And so far this season, they've been lighting up the stat sheet. Jeremiah Love, 279 yards, rushing in 3 games. He's averaging just a hair under 8 yards per carry, which is top 10 in the country. And then right behind him, Jadarian Price, 20 carries, 154 yards, 7.7 yards per carry, although that number is a bit skewed because he had a 70-yard touchdown run against Purdue and a 40-plus yard touchdown run against Texas A&M. But still, those are 2 great touchdown runs. They have been great, and they have been really carrying this Notre Dame offense through the first 3 games. Also, you got to give some love to Devin Ford and Aeneas Williams. They have been solid in pass protection. Kedron Young, the true freshman, got his first carry against Purdue as well. So this group is extremely talented. They are deep, and I feel pretty damn confident this group is going to stay at the top throughout the season, barring injury. Okay, coming into number 2, I got the cornerbacks. No surprise here either. The corners have shut down opposing wideouts for the most part this season. Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray have been terrific. And Jordan Clark has played really well at nickel. He didn't play a ton against Northern Illinois because for the most part, Notre Dame was in their 4-3 base defense, which did not allow for a ton of opportunities for Clark. But Morrison and Gray are who we thought they could be in the preseason. And through 3 games, Morrison, Gray, and Clark have given up a combined 16 receptions on 32 targets, so that's a 50% completion percentage, and they've only allowed 123 receiving yards. They also have 5 pass breakups, including the game winner from Christian Gray against Texas A&M. They don't have any interceptions yet, and honestly, they should have one. Christian Gray dropped an easy pick six against Purdue. Maybe that's why I don't have them as one, but Benjamin Morrison is an absolute star. We knew that going into the season. For any concerns we had about his health, he has put those to bed. Christian Gray is on the rise, and as I said, Jordan Clark has been a really reliable option at nickel. I think he's been as good as his predecessors, Thomas Harper and Tariq Bracy before him. So they're going to be neck and neck with the running backs all year, in my opinion. They also have quality depth. I think Jaden Mickey's had a couple bad plays when he's been out there, but the true freshman Leonard Moore has looked good. He came in for 5 plays against Texas A&M. That showed a lot of trust from the coaching staff in him to go out there. Was on the field for 27 plays against Purdue. Didn't see a lot of action because he was shutting down their opposing wide receiver. This group is extremely talented, and I think they are just as good as we thought they would be going into the season, and they have a real chance to finish the season at that top spot. Number 3, I got the safeties. So the defensive backs as a whole have certainly been a bright light for this Notre Dame team, and specifically the Notre Dame defense. Xavier Watts picked up right where he left off with an interception against Texas A&M and has improved his overall game from last year, despite the fact that he isn't on pace to get 7 interceptions, although who knows what's going to happen with Watts because he really turned it on in the second half of the year. If he does that again this year, he could be in the running for the Bronco Nagurski Award as the defending trophy winner, I guess you could say. He does not have a missed tackle on the year. I think that's the most impressive thing to me. He wasn't an elite tackler last year. I thought that was one thing he could definitely improve upon going into the season, and he has. He's currently tied for second on the team with 13 tackles, and Adon Schuler is potentially another rising star. He beat out Rod Hurd in camp, which was a bit of a surprise considering Schuler is only a redshirt freshman. Hurd has been playing college football forever, had over 2,000 snaps going into the season when he transferred over from Northwestern. But Schuler showed why he won that job in the season opener when he got that interception off Connor Wigman in the first half. He also made a really, really nice play against Purdue in the first half when he was in coverage. Then he realized he needed to rush Hudson Card in a scramble drill. And then when Card tried to throw it, Schuler went up, knocked it down. Really impressive play by him. And even though Rod Hurd has not been a starter, he's been really solid when he's out there. He's played 83 snaps to Schuler's 128, and Rod Hurd has registered 9 tackles. The fact that they can bring him out there as the third safety shows you the depth of that room. And going into the season, I think we all knew that Xavier Watts was going to be a great player. Right, he was one of the best players in the entire country last year, and he has been great this year as well. But what about the other guys? Like, we started to hear about Adon Schuler and his rise actually during spring practice when Hurd could not participate because he was still technically a student at Northwestern. Well, Schuler took advantage of those reps, and he's been applying that thus far into the season. They have really stepped up. Plus, we got to give a shout out to Kennedy Urlacher. How about that? Making some plays in garbage time. He's getting some hype, and obviously his last name has something to do with it. But I tell you what, man, if he looks this good as a true freshman, he is going to be a force on the field in a few years. And yes, I understand it was in the second half against a Purdue team that had just given up. I was still very impressed with what I saw from him. And while Notre Dame, they have 2 true freshman safety, Tay Johnson and Tabron Benny-Powell, who are going to miss this season due to shoulder injuries. This is a great opportunity for Kennedy Urlacher to step up and really solidify a spot on the depth chart for next season. I don't expect to see a ton from Kennedy Urlacher unless it's garbage time like what we saw this past Saturday, but something to keep an eye on because for as good as Xavier Watts has been and for as good as Rod Hurd has been coming off the bench, both of those guys are going to be gone next year. So it's great to see Schuler step up and really live up to some of that hype we heard about him in the preseason, and then Kennedy Urlacher making some waves as well. So my top 3, I've got running back, cornerback, and safety. So one position on offense and then the entire defensive backfield. Meanwhile, the defensive line has looked a little bit shaky, particularly against Northern Illinois, but they bounced back in a big way against Purdue. Can they keep the momentum going? That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel. Well, we have something a little different for you, and time is running out because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. I honestly Cannot recommend this enough. I've had YouTube TV for years. It's great, affordable, and this Sunday ticket option just makes it that much better. Like, what's better than watching your favorite team play on Sundays? The ability to watch every other game so you can check in on your fantasy team as well. Football season is here, folks. I'm so excited, and FanDuel allows you to get in on the action like never before. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode is also brought to you by Roy. It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you all know, NIL has completely changed the game for athletes. Well, Roy changes the NIL game for fans. It allows fans to directly back their favorite college athletes, and with Roy, fans can play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams while athletes maximize their name, image, and likeness potential. Fans' contributions are securely held and are only distributed if the athlete makes the decision that aligns with the fan's support. If not, the money is returned to the fan. So download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. Just visit joinroy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Get the Roy app for iOS or Android and start making an impact on your favorite team. Use referral code LOCKEDON for an opportunity to win $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for more details. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. Okay, coming in at number 4 on the top position groups for Notre Dame so far, I've got the defensive line. And tell me if you saw this coming. Through 3 games, Jordan Botelho is going to be the best defensive lineman on this team. That's true. And it's also why his season-ending injury has been such a huge blow. He is the highest grade of any starter, according to Pro Football Focus. He was the best defensive lineman on the field against Texas A&M, and he was playing really well in that first half against Purdue before he suffered that knee injury. So just a really big blow for the Notre Dame defense, and it's going to be interesting to see how Notre Dame goes about replacing him. But as for the rest of the group, we thought going into the season that Howard Cross and Riley Mills would make up one of the best defensive tackle tandems in all of college football. And unfortunately, they have not lived up to the hype just yet. Howard Cross has been working his way back to 100% since he was dealing with a hamstring injury during preseason camp. He made a big sack against Texas A&M. He looked good against Purdue, but he has been on a bit of a pitch count so far. And Riley Mills has been ramping up. I've been a little bit disappointed in his play because I thought he'd really take off this year and basically make the jump that Jordan Botelho made. But it's taken him a few games. We started to see some improvement in that Purdue game, and I think that in the second half, he's going to be a big-time player because he also followed a similar trajectory last season. Like, he's not typically been that great to start the season, but then once he gets going, he really turns it on and has the potential to dominate, specifically in the second half of this season. RJ Oben has been a disappointment so far. There's really no sugarcoating it. I thought he'd be one of the most impactful transfers on this team as the starting strong side end after he transferred from Duke, but he has just not been very good up to this point. He was basically a no-show against Texas A&M. They benched him against Northern Illinois to play Josh Burnham, but now Josh Burnham is dealing with an ankle injury, and RJ Oben is really going to have to step up. But in his place, Jason Onye, surprisingly, making some plays on the edges. He leads the team in sacks right now with 1.5, and he's going to have an increased role now that Jordan Botelho is out, and while RJ Oben figures things out, while Josh Burnham is also on the bench, like Jason Onye, now is your time to shine. Also, Boubacar Traore, now is your time to shine as well, and he started doing that against Purdue. He had an interception for a touchdown, although, to be honest with you, I think me or you could have returned that for a touchdown because Hudson Card just lofted it right to him, and then he walked into the end zone. Traore actually looked a little bit surprised at how easy it was for him to score. Like, he was looking around like, is there a flag? What's going on? Nope, it's a touchdown, man. It was just that easy, and his role is going to be increased a lot without Botelho. He has a really, really bright future. I think he has a ton of potential. Is he going to be able to do it on a down-to-down basis? We are going to have to see, but he has 1 sack on the year, and I think that he could end up having double-digit sacks this season. You also got to look at Donovan Heinisch, back up to Cross and Mills in the defensive, in the interior of the defensive line, while Gabe Rubio recovers from his injury that he suffered in preseason camp. I thought Heinisch played really well against Texas A&M. The dude was fighting as much as he possibly could out there in that heat, while Howard Cross rested a little bit in that game. But we also have to admit that Heinisch was getting pushed off the ball by Northern Illinois. There were some plays where he was getting driven like 5 yards down the field. And look, he's playing a lot more than we probably expected he would by this point in the season. He's not quite as big as his brother, but he's shined at moments this year. And if he's starting to put it together on a more consistent basis, he can end up being a really impactful player for this year. But Notre Dame needs Howard Cross to be 100%. They need to get Gabriel Rubio back in the fold because so far they've been dealing with a lot of injuries on the defensive line. And even though I feel good about this group's depth overall, it's being tested quite a bit early on. They have not lived up to the preseason hype. I had them at number 1 going into the season. There's still time to rectify that, but so far I've got them at number 4. At number 5, I've got the linebackers. And a big reason why is because they had 2 really strong games and then one really bad one against Northern Illinois. Jack Kaiser has been solid. He rarely comes off the field. He leads the team in tackles with 17. He's a playmaker. This is pretty much what we expected from Jack Kaiser going into this season, which is his 6th with the program. Jane Osbury is a future star. He is a stud. I wasn't sure what his role would be before the season because he was the backup rover, and a rover is the position that comes off the field when Notre Dame runs nickel. And really, at this point, nickel is their base defense. He didn't play a ton against Texas A&M, only 17 snaps, but he had 5 tackles. And when he's out there, man, he is making plays. He has 12 tackles and 71 snaps, which is, this in terms of the snap count, it's 4th among the linebackers, and it's just 1 above Kingston Viliamo Asa, who is 5th. Osbury's been out there for 71 plays. KVA has been out there for 70. I expect that to change as the season goes along because even though Jane Osbury's had some misses, like he had a couple bad run fits against Northern Illinois, he is just all over the ball when he's on the field, and he has elite athleticism, can make plays in the run game, in the pass game. He has been a really, really good player. Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliamo Asa have been solid at the Mike linebacker position. Bowen has been a little bit better up to this point, in my opinion, but Kingston Viliamo Asa is surging. He had his first interception of his career, has half a sack. And I feel like those 2 guys are going to constantly be competing throughout the rest of their careers because they both play the same position. Maybe KVA moves over to Will next year, but these are 2 very good young linebackers who have the ability to make plays all over the field. Jalen Sneed has played some good football for sure. He's definitely improved, but he also did get benched in the second half against Northern Illinois after he made a bad whiff on a tackle. He is still working on being a consistent player, but when you look at this group overall, considering how young they are and inexperienced they were going into the season, they have certainly impressed me. They have a ton of athleticism. They can make a ton of plays, but every once in a while they make that boneheaded mistake where like, oh, yep, they're starting a bunch of guys who don't really have a ton of experience, or at least playing guys without a ton of experience. And I think that showed up a lot on tape against Northern Illinois. They looked confused when Northern Illinois was running all that misdirection stuff. So they played a lot of really good football, but some really bad football, and that is the reason why they're right there in the middle of the pack at number 5. Number 6, I've got the tight ends, okay? Finally, an offensive position. It's been a while since I named one. Mitchell Evans, who is the second best player on the entire offense, in my opinion, behind Jeremiah Love, has not been out there a ton as he still works his way back from the torn ACL injury that he suffered last year against Pittsburgh. But when he's out there, man, he's making plays. 5 catches, 53 yards, 4 of which went for a first down, 3 of which came on third down plays. So he's typically just been out there for the passing plays. I think he still needs to figure out how much he can do with his knee in the blocking game, but he's going to get better, and Notre Dame really needs him to be at full go against Louisville. And then behind him, Cooper Flanagan and Kevin Bauman have the only 2 receiving touchdowns on the year for any Notre Dame player. And yes, I understand that's partially on the quarterback, but still, that's pretty good that they are the ones with the touchdowns. Eli Raridan was MIA the first 2 games, but he was a big part of the pass game against Purdue. He made some plays, 3 catches for, 30 yards. And the fact that Notre Dame was going to him early and often and what he was able to do in space is a good reminder of what he could be. Physically, he's so gifted. He has a ton of potential, but I do think that the 2 ACL injuries that he suffered so far in his career have set him back a little bit. He struggles at blocking for sure, but I think that Purdue game was a good glimpse of like what Eli Raridan could do down the road. Once Mitchell Evans is back fully healthy, he's going to be the prominent tight end. He's going to be the guy that Notre Dame goes to on third downs, and he's probably rarely going to come off the field. But when you have guys like Flanagan, who also made the key block on Jeremiah Love's game-winning touchdown run against Texas A&M, and you've got someone with the ability and potential of Eli Raridan, and then the consistency of Kevin Bauman when he's healthy, this is a really good group. They haven't had a ton of opportunities, but I think they are going to improve as the year goes on. Mitchell Evans is a big, big part of this offense, and I don't know if he's going to be fully off the pitch count this weekend against Miami of Ohio, but I think we're going to start to see why he is such a good player in that Louisville game, expecting a huge game from him in that one. I also said in the Miami of Ohio preview episode this week that Mitchell Evans is going to score the first He's going to be on the receiving end of Riley Leonard's first passing touchdowns on Saturday. So mark it down. But what position group has been the biggest weakness on the team thus far? I have an idea who you might be thinking, but I actually disagree. I'll explain why next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. Whether it be sports, concerts, comedy shows, you name it, I love going to live events. And Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And the great thing about Gametime is the curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, you name it. Just recently, I decided to go to a Dodgers game on the same day that Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois because my favorite baseball team, the Cleveland Guardians, were in town. I was like, you know what? I need to pick me up. I want to go see my favorite team play in person. I rarely ever get to do that. So I looked at Gametime, saw some great prices. I ended up going, and yes, the Guardians did lose. They were down 6-0 before I could even sit down in my seat. I still ended up having a great time, all thanks to Gametime. But my favorite thing about the app is you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and then you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay, the 3 lowest ranked position groups I have are all on the offensive side of the ball, which probably doesn't come as a surprise to you. But at number 7, I've got offensive line, which I guess is a marginal improvement because going into the season, I had offensive line projected to be dead last. This group was good enough against Texas A&M to win. They were going up against one of the best defensive lines in the country. I thought they held their own enough to give Notre Dame a shot in that one. But they were bad against Northern Illinois. They took a big step back, and I thought the fact that they were getting blown off the ball by the Huskies' front 7 was a bit discouraging. Then they came out against Purdue, and they absolutely dominated. So I'm not really sure how NIU was such a struggle and Purdue was such a dominant effort, and I understand that Purdue obviously is not very good, but that was a big change, and I think Notre Dame cannot afford to keep having those setbacks. They need to keep on an upward trajectory, which is going to be difficult to do now because they just lost Ashton Craig, their starting center, one of their best offensive linemen as a whole, out for the season, and Billy Schrouth, their right guard, who has also been one of their best offensive linemen, he is going to be out for several weeks. The good thing for Notre Dame is that the 2 guys replacing Craig and Schrouth both have starting experience, albeit Coogan, who is going to be starting at center now the rest of the way. His experience came at left guard, but Rocco Spindler has started 10 games at guard before. I think he's going to be just fine filling in for Billy Schrouth. As for Anthony Knapp, there was a lot of questions about him going into the season. True freshman, left tackle, a lot to ask. He's been rough. I thought he was good enough against Texas A&M, but since then he has been a bit of a liability over there. He's got to stop holding. He's had some bad holdings. He's also given up quite a few pressures. And then Sam Pendleton at left guard, who I actually had high hopes for going into the season, he's got to improve as well. There was a point where I thought maybe Notre Dame could potentially switch him out for Pat Coogan or Rocco Spindler. Well, now they don't have a choice because those guys are already playing at different positions. So Sam Pendleton has to figure it out on his own. And really, the offensive line has to step up in a big way, despite the fact that they're now going with 3 guys who are not projected to start at the start of the season. I guess one good thing is we don't really talk about Emil Wagner anymore, the starting right tackle. He's been solid. There were a lot of concerns about how he'd be able to hold up, given the fact that he doesn't weigh a ton. But for the most part, he's been fine. He gave up 1 sack, but he's been definitely the better tackle of the 2. 3 sacks in 23 games as a whole for this group is not bad, especially when a couple were on Steve Angeli, but Riley Leonard was also able to avoid a few. The real concern here is they have 23 pressures given up. That's a lot and needs to be improved. Okay, at 8, I've got the quarterback. Some of you probably think quarterback should be last. There is certainly an argument to be made. I really looked at these last 2 spots. I spent some time on it, but I'm putting quarterback at 8 because Riley Leonard played well enough against Texas A&M, gave them a great shot there at the end with his running ability, and he also made 2 critical throws to set up that game-winning touchdown by Jeremiah Love. He hit Jane Greathouse in a big 3rd down, had that beautiful pass to Bo Collins, which really set the whole drive up. And I'll admit, Riley Leonard was terrible. It's a big reason why they lost that game. No doubt about that. But He also ran the ball extremely well against Purdue. And even though he certainly needs to improve as a passer, we can't just eliminate the fact that what he has done with his legs has been a huge help to this offense. I mean, he had 3 rushing touchdowns in the first half against Purdue to go along with 100 yards on the ground and 100 through the air. He's the first player to do that in a half since Lamar Jackson. It's pretty elite company. Now, let's be clear. We need to see more from the quarterbacks, and specifically Riley Leonard, in the passing game. Steve Angeli, though, came in, and for this exercise, he does count. He came in and looked really good in the second half against Purdue. There were a couple bad plays, like the sacks that I just mentioned, but he did throw the only 2 passing touchdowns of the season. He also made a really nice throw to Jaden Harrison for a 42-yard catch. He's a really good backup quarterback, and as I have said over and over, I feel like if Steve Angeli had come in replace of Riley Leonard in the second half of that Northern Illinois game, Notre Dame would have won that game. So I don't put as much fault on Riley Leonard for that loss as I do with the coaches, because he was clearly not hurt. And considering Notre Dame was not willing to run him, they should not have been willing to play him. That should have been Steve Angeli. Notre Dame would likely be 3-0. But they also won the game against Texas A&M partially because of Riley Leonard and what he was able to do with his legs. So this isn't really sustainable. You can't just look at the quarterback position as another running back out there on the field. Riley Leonard has to be better. I think he will be better. But because he was so bad against Northern Illinois, I have them at second to last. And at last, I have the wide receivers. And part of this, I admit, is unfair because I don't think they've been given a ton of opportunities because Riley Leonard has not been as good throwing the ball. If, they had, Caleb Williams at quarterback, or like Bo Nix last year when he was dealing in college. I know that's hard to believe now because he's been so bad for the Broncos, but you get my point. If they had a pass-first quarterback, the receivers would have more opportunities, and there's a good chance that they would be higher on this list. But outside of Bo Collins, nobody from the wide receiver unit has really stepped up and made big plays. Collins has been good, 12 receptions, 116 yards, but Jaden Greathouse missed a golden opportunity against Northern Illinois. He was open on a wheel route. Riley Leonard threw him a perfect ball on third down that would have set them up for a touchdown, and he just dropped it. There was a huge play in the game. As I said, it came on third down, so it was a drive killer. And considering all the hype about Jaden Greathouse going into the season, he really hasn't done enough to live up to that just yet. Now, he did get screwed against Purdue because he had a nice catch for a big game that was called back for one of Anthony Knapp's holdings. But still, I expect to see a little bit more from him, and I actually do expect a big game from him going against Miami of Ohio. Jaden Thomas has been really good as a blocker so far, but the fact that I'm talking about his blocking ability, not his receiving ability, is a bit of an indictment on the receiving room as a whole. The Jordan Faison injury certainly hurt them. We have not seen Chris Mitchell separate much yet. So the receiver room up to this point has 36 receptions, 357 yards, and 0 touchdowns. Again, I want to make this abundantly clear. I understand that the quarterback has struggled to get them the ball. But there have been a few opportunities for them to make some big plays or get separation and create a big play. And for the most part, it just hasn't happened yet. I expect this group to be a lot better in the future. Mike Denbrock seems to have confidence in this group, and particularly the improvement in the passing game. They need to get better. I think they will get better. But they also need to run better routes. They need to create more separation, and they need to make some contested catches to help their quarterback build some confidence and really get this passing game back on track. So, what does this tell us? Well, the running backs have been the offense. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The defense as a whole has been much better than the offense, and the biggest weakness up to this point has been Notre Dame's passing ability, or I guess lack thereof. So they need to improve that, no doubt, and if they do, this offense could be really good, and this team as a whole could be really good, and what we thought they could be in the preseason. Here's actually what I had before the season. I had D-line 1, corner 2, running back 3, quarterback 4, safety 5, linebacker 6, wide receiver 7, tight ends 8, and O-line 9. So the D-line has had a pretty significant drop from 1, which is what I projected them to be, to 4. Cornerbacks and running backs right there at the top. We expected that. Quarterback has not been really good, so they've fallen big time. Safety has been an improvement. Linebacker, I had them about right. Wide receiver, I was a little bit higher on them. Tight ends, similar range. Offensive line has been a little bit better than I thought they'd be, but we're going to have to see because, as I said, they're going to have to replace 3 starters now after what they had at the start of the season. As we start to look ahead here, I don't see cornerback or running back being taken off the top unless there's an injury, but I expect the quarterback, the D-line, and the wide receiver room to make some big, big improvements, and Notre Dame needs them to step up if they want to have any chance at running the table. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Last call for mailbag questions this week. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning to answer them. So to submit yours, just drop them below in the YouTube comments or send them in on social media. The X account is at Locked On Irish, or you can send them in on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. Send them in if you want to be featured on tomorrow's show. I always have a lot of fun doing the mailbags, and you guys always send some good questions. So keep them coming. Also, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. And for your second listen, check out the Locked On College Football Podcast with Spencer McLaughlin. I'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place.